Good. Thank you for inviting me. I really do appreciate it. I have taken a little time to learn about your principles and just the hymn and just everything that's going on here. I feel like I feel very welcome and I feel very comfortable and I do appreciate it. I This is pretty much going to be an invitation for you to visit Hannibal and to visit Jim's Journey. Um, as as you were told, next year we're going to be celebrating our 10th anniversary. And that's a milestone that many folks thought we wouldn't get to. Um, but we did it and we continue to thrive. And we have a lot of goals and a lot of things that we want to do. Our a must for America's hometown, that seems to be the theme, and that's what I'm going to focus on. Uh, and I will say this, it is a must for America's hometown. Hannibal, if you will probably well know, Sister City, that's how I refer to Quincy, is all about Twain, all about Tom and Becky. It's way, way, way more than that. Jim cannot be neglected. Jim was a real person. He was based on a man named Daniel Quarles. In my research, and I will just interrupt everything here to say that all that I try to do, I try to research it and I try to present factual information. I don't talk about Tom and Becky, but I do talk about Jim, but I refer to him in his real name, Daniel Quarles. Daniel Quarles, based on the Hannibal City Directory, 1873, the emancipated Daniel Quarles lived and died in Hannibal. He brought his children to Hannibal. They made a way in Hannibal. They went to our little colored Douglasville school. They went to our little grocery stores. They worked for the people that would hire them. And you know, for just emancipated, it was a struggle. I don't know if well, most folks don't know this, but emancipation, obviously it was a great thing, and we're going to be celebrating it with a Juneteenth celebration. But it was a struggle. That first 5 years or so, 4 million had been emancipated. 1 million died that first 5 years. Starvation, diseases, homelessness, murder. So it was a struggle, but it was real, and the people that made it have contributed to our DNA, and they make us very strong, and we got to be proud of that, and we got to recognize that the DNA that's going through our veins. I mean, you know, that's something, and that's what you know, makes us. We're proud of that. In fact, I want to say now that that's one of the reasons I present Jim's Journey. Not only that we can learn the struggles and the hurdles, because I have to talk about that, it's real. But I spend way more time talking about the achievements, the contributions. If we don't know that, we don't know what we're capable of. And we have to know that to know what we can reach for, what we need to strive for. When I first opened Jim's Journey, it was, you know, it was the first Black History Museum obviously in Northeast Missouri. And I had, one of my fondest memories is a high school girl that came in, and of course I had yearbook photographs and pictures of our churches and, you know, all those things I cover. But the girl said, "Oh my God, my grandma's in a museum." And so she got on her cell phone and started calling people. Those kinds of lessons and those kinds of stories make me happy that I've done this, and pleased that I've done this, and pleased that I do this work. Again, you are all invited to visit on Zoom, the folks on Zoom and the folks here. We're at 509 North 3rd Street. We're in a little stone building. Samuel Clemens refers to it in the Welshman House in Tom Sawyer. But we refer to it as the little stone house that slaves built. And it's teeny little room, and it's packed with artifacts, memorabilia, documents, photographs about Hannibalians and Hannibal residents. At any rate, it's 509 North 3rd. I'm open all summer. If my phone number's everywhere, so if I'm not open, you can call me and I'll try to get there and give you a personal tour, which are extra special because that gives us more time to exchange life experiences and to talk about what whatever you want to talk about, whatever I want to talk about. But you do have that opportunity. The little stone building, I told you it was built by enslaved people, and it's massive, massive stones. And if you can imagine, the black people, I mean, they had to haul those stones from someplace to build that building. So we did the heavy lifting. And when they talk about Moses Bates, the founder of Hannibal, they neglect the 4 slaves he carried with him, that he bought with him from Tennessee to do the heavy lifting. So we built the roads, we built the homes, we built the businesses, we built the infrastructure for Hannibal. In fact, I mentioned the city directory. I don't know if Quincy has one. I suspect you do. But at any rate, there's a section that talks about businesses, manufacturing businesses for the most part. And it took some thinking for me to figure out that all those hands that they talk about, that built the lighthouse, that built that worked in the tobacco factory or that grew the hemp, those hands were black hands. They were doing that and they were enslaved. They may not have been owned by those business owners, but they were leased by those business owners from someone that owned that property. And so they got her done, is what I like to say. So I talk about that. I talk about Daniel Coral. She told you some of that. I told you about my little building. Um, I had, and she told you a little, well, enough, way more than I need to tell you about me. But another thing I want to say is that when I returned to Hannibal, my husband Joel and I were both retired. We came back very different than we left as 19, 20-year olds. We had been exposed to lots of things. My husband was a HR professional, and he had all these good jobs, and he told me he was making all this money. So I believed him, and we went to a lot of things. We were invited to a lot of things. And so I came back to Hannibal a different person, and different in that I had grown. Not different in that I loved the community. I wanted to see it better. I started going to different events. One of the things I went to was an exhibit. It was called Historical Hannibal, and it was all photographs, and it was probably a room this size. Uh, there were only 2 photographs, though, that represented the African American community. One was our church, our oldest church, 8th and Center Street Baptist Church, and our oldest segregated school, Douglas School, named after Frederick Douglass. Anyway, those were the only 2 things there. So I approached the curator and I said, I think our story is a bit more than that. I think we had some contributions, and it's just more to that. And I will go ahead and admit to you that he was probably offended. And he said to me, "You go do it." So I wrote an article. I published it in our local newspaper. I published it in the Quincy newspaper. I published it in Monroe City. I said, "I have this story to tell about the Black community. Help me." Folks started donating things. So I have, and I'm going to say this, hundreds of things in the museum. Some of it's stored at the farm, some of it's stored in, it's just in storage. A lot of it's in storage. But when you come there, you will be a bit overwhelmed with the photographs and the stories that I have to tell. And every item in there is a story associated with it. I'm proud of everything, and for me, I'm somewhat of a teacher in terms of sharing things, but this was quite a learning experience for me. I learned that there was a Black newspaper in Hannibal in 1914. I learned that there was all these businesses, and I mean, there was an undertaker of newly emancipated enslaved person was the undertaker for the black community. I do a lot of research. So I came across a 1923 death certificate. It was for a man named William Roberts, and it listed his job as mail carrier. Ah, I don't know about you folks, but to me, that's a good job. And we grew up thinking that was a good job. Well, to my dismay, he was a mail carrier because white people weren't going to deliver our mail. They weren't going to deliver our milk. They weren't going to deliver our babies. They weren't going to move us if we needed. They weren't going to. We had to develop our own community within. And we flourished. We had lots of businesses, restaurants, hotels, attorneys, doctors, nurses. We were doing okay, within that community. When they integrated the schools, and I was part of that integration, well, Joel and I we were part of that integration in 1954. I went to, I was the only little black girl in my fourth grade class, and Joel went off to a country school. At any rate, it wasn't a great experience. We knew that the teachers at Douglas, they loved us. We were punished, if we didn't do what they're expected of us. But we knew that they cared for us, and they carried with them the thinking that education was the only way out of this. And so I showed up at the white school. I was raised my hand. I swear I was ignored. I didn't get picked for dodgeball or kickball. My brothers say it was because I was not athletic enough, but I don't know that that's true. At any rate, we were not clamoring to go to school with white kids. All we wanted was better books, better facilities, our teachers to get a decent wage, and there are so many stories about that. In fact, I found a picture of a biology class or a chemistry biology class. At any rate, I noticed that all these kids were lined up around this microscope. Well, a woman that happened to be in that class told me we only had one microscope. That's why we were gathered around it, and that was our issue, and that's why we were clamoring for an equal education. One of my prized possessions at the museum is a 1927 colored directory. There is a city directories, but we had a man in Hannibal who published our newspapers. We got a newspaper every Thursday, colored newspaper. He published our yearbooks, and he published this colored directory. It was an awesome find. As a matter of fact, I've loaned it to the Missouri Historical Society. They didn't have anything like that. At any rate, what it has in it is where people worked, where they lived, who your neighbors were. My favorite thing about it, and this again comes through my own learning, is that the undertaker, who would have been considered wealthy, and the just laborer were in the same neighborhood. We were all side by side. So it meant a kid did not have to leave the neighborhood to be mentored. And it was a great find, and I love to share that with people. And you'll see that if you come to the museum. One of the things I told you about visitors. Two things have happened with visitors that I'll share with you. One was when we integrated the school. I had a white man to come in, and he said he was, when we showed up that September, he said, "Where'd all these black kids come from?" Because we were segregated. The kids didn't necessarily leave the neighborhood like the parents did. My mom was a maid. My stepfather was a janitor, so they were out. But we were in our community, going to our own church, going to our own schools, going to our own little grocery stores. It was a community within. Another lesson from that was I told you about the colored directory. Well, for whatever reason, we had advertisements from white people, white businesses, and one was one of those Jim Crow type, Sambo type photographs. And I had a visitor come in. It was for a shoe store, and his parents, grandparents had owned that shoe store. And he said, "That's not true. That's not right. That's not fair. That was not us." And so he insisted on bringing me another photograph to put in the museum alongside that one, and I have. And it's a photograph of his grandfather waiting on a black customer and a black man shelving shoes. So, I mean, there are things that, I'm saying that to say there are things that you can contribute from your own life experiences that can make us better and make us do better. I said that one of the reasons I do this is to give us some exposure and to teach people. It could be Quincy people, Hannibal people, people from all over the country do show up. I don't get as many as Twain visitors get, and I'm always amazed. We're about a block, maybe a half a block from Huck Finn's home. And people go to see Huck Finn's home. And I'm talking thousands of people. But they don't come to Jim's house. I don't get it. I probably never will. But for that reason, I have adjusted to that, and I am fine with that, because the people that comes at Jim's house, they're people that are interested and people that want to hear this story. And so I'm happy to tell it and happy to invite you there and share many more stories with you. One of my line items here was to talk about plans. Well, we do have lots of plans. Jim's journey, 10 years, we're still at it. I get involved in community projects from Black History Month to King's birthday, and then, like I said, we have Juneteenth coming up. I happen to be on that committee. We're doing several things. One of the things I'm most proud of is the mural we're about to unveil. It's a mural. Hannibal, for whatever reason, has decided it wants to be the city of murals. And some of the decision makers have been our community leaders. The first one, this is Taylor. Taylor's going to show you a picture that, I'm so sorry, Chef. Tell me your name again. My artist friend. Suzette, I'm sorry. I met Suzette at an art exhibit, and it was a group that she's involved in. They invited me to curate their Black History Month exhibit. But I don't know if Suzette knew this, but I am an artist, and I do these things called photo montages. Well, Hannibal, the city, decided that they have about a 100-foot wall, and maybe 30 feet tall, that they were going to put a mural there. And they did, and they got started with it, and then they put out a GoFundMe. And then I happened to look at what their proposal was, and they had decided this, and Jim was not on it. Twain was on it, Tom was on it, Molly was on it, the little steamboat was on it, the lighthouse was on it, but no Jim. So I staged a protest, and I asked people to join me. We are not going to do this mural. We're not going to contribute to this GoFundMe until we get Jim on there. Well, they did Jim under protest. So he's teeny tiny Jim, and he's big, giant, everybody else. So I took that mural and I turned it into a kind of satire, and my title for this is See Something, Say Something. Taylor, can you put that picture? That's it. So I put a mustache on Twain, and I put a silly hat on Twain, and I put something on Molly. It's not their mural, it's my mural and my interpretation of what they had done. And the sign, who is being held by Joe Douglas. By the way, Joe Douglas is not Injun Joe. See something, say something. So that's what we got going on. And we're doing some other murals. We you can imagine it's, well, you live in a similar community. It was a struggle to get somebody to loan me a building, to give us a building. Every building I asked for, well, we're getting ready to tuck point, or no, we're getting ready to sell it, or no, we don't want your mural. I mean, no, well, I take that back. Nobody said, no, we don't want your mural. They just said, we have other plans. But I finally got somebody to agree. We finally have a mural going up in downtown, historic downtown Hannibal, and it's going to be Hannibal's African American icons. So, there, thank you.